HHR tried to get rid of my dad right before he was able to get his pension. My father worked for a Forbes 500 company since the 70s. Moved up the ranks as a software engineer. And management. Has patents for the company that saved it millions of dollars. He's almost to pension age, and suddenly HR starts making his life miserable. He noticed this trend was happening to some of his coworkers when they were getting close to age 60 as well. HR lady calls him into the office and says that he was not punching in and out at the correct time. My father, an engineer, is very, very detail-oriented. He knew that these were false accusations and asked HR to prove it. They came back a week later and couldn't prove it, and he said, "Of course you can't. I've been driving the corporate carpool bus from a major city 40 miles away from the company for the last 15 years. I always have 16 witnesses on my clock in time, and I haven't been late in 15 years. HR lady came back a week later and they said that they were going to fire him for letting people into the building without badging. He asked to see when and where he was letting someone into the building without badging. They showed that he held the door for his best friend who had also been working there since the 70s, who had his foot cut off after having type 2 diabetes. He was in a wheelchair. Prior to this, my dad took the chief of security out for lunch and told him about how this company wanted him to leave before he got his pension. So he got some footage of his own. My dad said, "That is very interesting. You are going to fire me for holding the door for my best friend of 35 years after his foot was amputated and he was in a wheelchair. Fine then, I hope you fire the CEO and yourself as well." He then proceeded to show footage of the HR lady holding the door for his friend and the CEO holding the door for his friend. My father ended up staying there until he got his pension. Story 2. Here is your 0.00% idle time. I worked for a company that provides a utility truck, and one of the analytics they monitor is how long the truck stays in place with the motor on. The target number was something like 3%. I consistently was stuck in traffic due to my area being changed to the downtown area of my city and naturally raising my idle percent. My supervisor began constantly badgering me over the raise of my idle percent, about 10-12% higher now. After they decided to give me a written verbal warning, I became the most efficient truck, no idler in our branch, and I brought it down to a 0.00 by shutting the truck off at every stop sign, red light, highway stopped in traffic, in drive-thrus, and instantly off when I got to where I was going. Now remember, this is a utility truck that is charging my 2 phones, laptop, tablet, and my various equipment's rechargeable batteries, all this juice sucking and no alternator spinning, putting the power back into the truck battery, causing it to die a lot. Now, the rules the company had made it forbidden for me to jump the truck myself, so I had to call the company and they sent out a tow truck to jump-start it for me. I could do it myself anyway and probably would have, but they are writing people up out here for petty shit, and every time I call this tow truck, it takes a minimum of 2 hours for it to show up. I began doing this multiple times a day, every day until they figured my truck was broken. It goes to the shop, checks out, they give it back, I kill it again. They end up giving me an entirely new truck. I start killing it. I repeated this process until they gave me the 3rd truck and the manager calls me to ask what my daily routine is. I go through the basics and add in the whole stop at, red light engine off, stop and traffic engine off, etc. And dude goes, "Why the fuck are you doing this?" My supervisor wrote me up for my idle time being too high. This is completely ridiculous. He tossed my write-up and I'm guessing talked to the soup because I never heard a word about idle time again and I quit caring about it. Story 3. My HS tried to punish me for filing a First Amendment lawsuit against them. I used it to get into my dream college. Throw away because it'll be easy to find my real identity. In 2008, I was involved in a federal lawsuit when my rural Texas high school tried to suspend me for wearing a shirt supporting then Democratic hopeful John Edwards. Hindsight is 20/20ths. They said it was a violation of the dress code, which was only ever selectively enforced. My parents had my back and agreed that it was, to quote my very white dad, redneck cracker nonsense. I'll never forget during the initial meeting when my principal called in a school board member. He said that if I got suspended, I would probably get kicked off the football team, and that could hurt me getting into college. It didn't matter. I was a miserable player and a smart kid, so it wasn't going to be what took me to college. But the slimy fake concern as he tried to leverage my future against my speech is something I'll never forget. Anyway, as the case goes on, the squeeze gets tighter. First, they have the football coaches try to get me to drop it, having the football coaches talk about how my selfishness means that they can't wear Fellowship of Christian Athletes shirts anymore, trying to embarrass me in front of the team. I'm a fat kid who openly plays Magic the Gathering in high school. Hit me with your best shot, I have no shame. Next, they host a meeting with all the teachers telling them I'm a problem and that they need to keep an eye on me in case I slip up. I found this out years after the fact when I bumped into my English teacher at a friend's wedding. Finally, they just start pulling in students from my classes to get them to say bad stuff about me. I was a class clown, so this turns into every single dirty joke, rude comment, or loud fart I ever made getting reported to school administration. Which then leads to this awful little toady vice principal calling me and my parents in and reading them back in front of my mother. That one stung. My parents still knew it was bullshit, but who wants their locker room jokes aired in front of their mom? They used this as pretext to expel me for 6 weeks, citing inappropriate sexual conduct. They shoved me into the disciplinary alternative education program, and I am fucking steaming. The program is basically where they warehouse kids with emotional problems they can't handle. You just sit in a room in a refurbished insane asylum and can't do anything but read or use the computer for monitored educational purposes. You also get booted from extracurriculars while you're in there. I know at this point they want me to make a scene so they can punish me further, so I do the exact opposite. I channel all my rage and new free time into my schoolwork, doing homework I would usually ignore because I knew I could ace the test. Now I'm doing both and my GPA is climbing. I start looking into scholarships and find a bunch that are really interested in political activism, and guess who now knows a little bit about that? I apply and rip my school a new asshole in everyone. Then I work with my dad and we find an attorney who will take our case pro bono, which means while the school bleeds fees, it doesn't cost us anything to keep it in court. I spent those weeks like a monk, motivated entirely by spite, doing everything I could to make their bullshit work for me. I got out, got back on all my teams, and ended up applying for a prestigious honors program at my dream school. Not only did I get in, but I got way more financial support than I thought I would. Eventually, we lost the case, but the school had to abolish the dress code anyway because they couldn't afford to get sued over it again. I don't like the idea that a school lost money, but man, they made the choice. They could have backed down whenever. Now I've graduated law school. I'm taking the bar in 2 weeks and already have a job investigating government corruption. I'm getting paid to be a pain in the ass of petty authority, and it's pretty sweet.